I never did anything to harm my daughter or my granddaughter.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Oh, man.
Casey Anthony's Parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
I want to tell you about Doing Justice, a new podcast from Cafe Studios. It's about a prosecutor's role in our justice system and is hosted by former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara.
Wait, I know him.
The show asks if we should allow an elected official to run for re-election while under investigation. It follows a sex worker who was robbed and gets her day in court.
Preet explores the key elements of cases from the unique perspective of the prosecutors grappling with urgent moral and legal questions. Subscribe to Doing Justice wherever you're listening now.
This is Jen from Yardley, Pennsylvania. Do what the cool kids do and get exclusive podcasts and more at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia, just like I do.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts, TV. And this week, she's left a trail of dead husbands. 2 of her children are missing, and she's obsessed with the end of the world. We'll talk about the new Dateline NBC podcast, Mommy Doomsday. Then, Danish police investigate the possible murder of a journalist on a homemade submarine whose body was dumped in the ocean. We'll review the Scandi docudrama, The Investigation. Joining me to get that done and more is my real-life husband and true crime co-author, former TV journalist and love of my life who watches Scandi Noir with me, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca. Talk.
Talk. Thank you. Yeah. Right. Also with us is journalist, true crime author, former defense investigator, licensed private investigator, resident cat lady, and yes, an actual fucking certified pet detective, Laura Bricker. Hello, Laura.
Good evening, Rebecca.
I guess my rule of not swearing in the first 5 minutes of the podcast is out the
fucking window.
And finally, our captain of woke cynicism, the author behind the noir novels known as the City Trilogy and host of the Strange Arrivals podcast, which is about UFOs, and our Patreon book club host, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hello, Rebecca.
So, guys, here we are. This podcast drops March 1st. Mm-hmm. Kevin, you and I think, returned from a vacation on March 1st of last year and have not left the house since.
Pretty much.
So we are pretty much
the
at the
13th of March, yeah.
Yeah, but we're like at the year anniversary of only seeing each other and eating shit from our freezer.
Right.
How is it? Well, also the pandemic and the grief and, all the things that go with it. Laura, how are you doing a year in to our new lifestyle that we're probably going to be living for at least another year?
Well, it's interesting. I think I've relaxed into it, but it took me a year to relax into it. So I'm doing a jigsaw puzzle this week. I'm making bread. I'm taking walks. I'm doing yoga. It's, I think I'm really in like pandemic times.
Wow. How are you doing, Toby?
Whatever. Can't complain. It's harder on the kids. I mean, it really is. I mean, I think it's, having a teenager right now and sort of the social isolation and stuff like that, I think is really tough. So, that's tough, but you can't complain. We've been healthy. I've had a chance to do a lot of work, and I'm not going to regret it when this ends and we can get back to normal, though. That's for sure.
Yeah. Kevin, we've been talking about one sort of theme about the pandemic that I really feel like we are very fortunate in.
Yeah.
We don't hate each other.
Oh, yeah.
Could you imagine?
Oh, yeah.
You quit your job at the same time we got back from our vacation, remember? Or right before we got. So it's been a year since you would have been at home anyway. But the plan was, I was going to be going to work every day, and you were just going to be here working on our podcast.
I've spent 0 days working home by myself.
Well, you in office.
The day, you were in the lockdown the day I was supposed to start working from
That's
home.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. So now how do you feel with me wandering into your office every day, several times a day, to talk to you about random things that you don't feel like talking about? How's that going for you?
It could be better.
You almost had it all, Kevin.
I almost had it all. Yeah.
Feels like a song. That does sound like a song.
It is a song.
It is a song.
It is. I'll tell you one thing that's funny that happened this week. And Kevin, I don't want to air our dirty laundry too much. I'll just give the broad brushstrokes.
All right.
Kevin likes to start work a little bit later in the morning, and then he likes to work until like 7-ish, like usually, right? And I sometimes my day job, like I am waiting for the COVID numbers to come in, or I'm still editing stories or something, so I work late. So Kevin, the other day, he finished working at like 7:15, 7:30. He comes walking in where I'm working, and he's like, so do you just want me to take care of dinner from now on? And I'm like, what? Is this the 1950s?
I object to the tone in which you told that story. The tone in which you attributed my dialogue.
No, I know you did not mean it that way. It's just how it was received.
Well, I could have complained and said, you're not cooking dinner, but instead I thought to myself, hey, I'm a modern guy. Perhaps I'm the one who should be cooking dinner.
But it came out like, hey, there's no food available for me the minute I'm done working. So get on it, lady. Get on it.
Not true. I wasn't done working.
She made a bolognese last week. I saw it.
I made a bolognese Monday, a homemade roast chicken on Tuesday, and like a Blue Apron on Wednesday. Tonight we had leftovers. It's fine. We're going to be fine. All right.
You guys, I have one food thing to say before we go to our actual show.
Sure.
I have to say, out of all the things that I've ever been interested in that people have gravitated to on our Facebook page, the air fryer has taken on a life of its own.
No.
And I get people like sending me messages, emails. I should mention I brought the air fryer on vacation with me.
We need an air fryer sponsor.
I know. I think we do.
Endorsement would be so strong.
Like, people are telling me they're buying air fryers because of me.
Nope.
We're trading recipes.
You're
I'm
a
telling
taste
you,
maker.
it's insane. And so thank you to all the air fryer love out there.
Never, ever, ever. Just fry it, guys. Just fry it.
Anytime I think of air fryers, I think of Mike Huckabee for some reason.
Toby, I made Brussels sprouts last night in the air fryer.
Oh, stop.
Very good.
That's not an advertisement.
Should we just start a podcast now?
How about it?
Leading off.
Kay and Larry Woodcock hadn't seen or heard from their grandson JJ in months.
We had no idea what was going on. Nothing. We knew nothing.
It was, where's JJ? Where's JJ? Where's JJ?
Where was he?
When police conducted a welfare check on Lori Vallow's children, the mom made a convincing show that the children were out of state. Daughter Tyree at college, and JJ, her son with special needs, was visiting a friend.
That's when we got involved. Dateline NBC. We started an investigation. And what we found? Well, it has to be heard to be believed.
But Lori's life has changed drastically in the recent past. Her third husband died suddenly. Her fourth husband was shot to death by her protective brother. And Lori's new husband, Chad, himself a recent widower, claims God has assigned him the task of determining who will be saved during the second coming.
My siblings are gone. Charles is gone. Alex is gone. Chad's wife is gone. The kids are missing. How much worse can it get?
Dateline NBC's newest podcast is Mommy Doomsday. Keith Morrison picks up where he left off with The Thing About Pam, applying his unique reporting style to a true crime mystery. Where are Lori's missing children? Why have so many people around her suddenly died? And how does her religious cult focused on the apocalypse have anything to do with this? Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from the first few episodes of Mommy Doomsday. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes. Kevin Flynn.
Yeah.
We listened to The Thing About Pam, and I know that Toby doesn't quite get the whole Keith Morrison Dateline thing.
Right.
But this is, another story brought to us by this team. And it is, you have to admit, a very interesting story.
The crime is really interesting, yes. Definitely.
Wait, I'm being Keith Morrison now. Really?
Really? Yeah, and I think it gets better and by it getting better. I think we learn more about the crime and get more into it the longer this goes on. I mean, by the end of the 4th episode, I'm like, oh, okay, wow, this is really interesting. I think it was a little hard to follow a lot, especially the first episode. There was a lot going on with different people. There's a lot of people coming in, sort of telling, sort of all this prologue kind of stuff. I don't know. I have some issues with the podcast, but I think the crime itself is one worth telling.
I'm going to tell you, I completely disagree with that. I think it's been very clear. We'll get to that later. Laura Bricker, Keith Morrison, here we are again. He leans into being Keith Morrison. He's not afraid to do that. We do hear him in this podcast interviewing people, and he just has that voice. But then he's also not afraid to say, like, huh, really? In the middle of his narration. I mean, I'm going to show my cards. I fucking love it.
But Lori's duty and privilege wasn't only to select good people, saved people. No, she also had to root out evil. And that's when this story gets even darker. Hard to imagine, I know.
How do you feel about the Keith Morrison-ness of this whole thing?
I'm laughing because I'm seeing Toby shake his head, and I would listen to Keith Morrison read the phone book. Seriously, his delivery and just the way that he can make like anything sound suspicious, it keeps me listening because he'll be like, so then, well, and it's like, and just everything he does, I just laugh at but it's also like, just it keeps you engaged, and it also kind of makes the story like you feel like somebody's telling you a naughty story the way he's narrating because of all these little sound effects that he does. And I think it works well in podcast form because it's definitely somebody that you're listening to and you're paying attention to. I mean, there's some things like I had a hard time, certain times characters came back and I was like, wasn't quite sure who people were, but the narrating by Keith Morrison, I love. Like, seriously, I want him to narrate my life.
Now, there is a thing in the first episode where he says this story is about religious fervor. It's about missing kids and zombies.
It seemed that as Lori got closer to Chad, more and more people in her life became zombies. Or so Chad and Lori decreed. And these zombies? They could be eliminated.
Now, Toby, you have to admit, the story actually is pretty wild in this podcast, right?
Yeah, no, it's 100% wild. And like you were saying, I like the way that they start off, at least the first couple, and especially the first one, it's like, in this podcast, we're going to go to Hawaii,
This story takes us to lazy beaches in Kauai, the desert in Arizona, a frostbitten pet cemetery, and to a small church group with wild and dangerous beliefs.
It's not like a quick start.
Yeah.
Right? So I think the fact that they've kind of teased that there's going to be other stuff coming up is helpful in kind of getting you through the beginning. I'm sort of on the fence. There's a lot of people and their relationships are a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Like at one point, somebody's described as being both this girl's aunt and her grandmother or something. Mm-hmm. And he's like, and we'll explain it later. And I was like, well, why don't you explain it now? Because this is like leaving me with a lot of questions that I feel like I'd rather just not have to think about in 5 minutes.
But that happens a bunch of times. I mean, I found myself thinking, like, I would always ask a question like, why was Charles picking up the kids for school when last I heard he and Lori had gotten back together? But then like 5 minutes later, it would be like, oh, by the way, since we last heard from them, they separated. Like, I do feel like there were some TV conventions where it was like, teaser, a thing in the future. And then you have to go back and explain that thing. Is that what you're talking about, Toby?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, again, I think I had the same thing with the thing about Pam, which is, it feels like some of these things would work better if you had something to look at.
Yeah.
That would like refresh your memory about who people are, and you might be able to get some visual cues about timing of different things. And so I feel like maybe sometimes that trips them up a little bit, or maybe it's just tripping me up. I don't know.
Yeah, Toby's right. I mean, I think that's the thing, that they're not signposting that part of it well. Where on TV, yeah, you will recognize the face and then you'll get the context. You don't always get that with a voice, especially if you haven't heard from that particular person in 10 or 15 minutes. So I think that is and this is produced by two television producers. not two podcast producers at NBC. I feel like that is a TV error.
I disagree. I mean, I honestly feel like this podcast, it's, for me, the audio version of watching a Dateline episode, which I know isn't for everybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are some Dateline episodes that even though you may be like, oh my God, the presentation of this is over the top and it's cheesy, I found myself, I was listening to episode 1 and 2 with my 18-year-old son. We were like doing a college visit with masks on where we couldn't actually tour the college, just drive by stuff. So we're listening to this podcast and I just kept saying like, what are you doing, Lori? Like, what are you doing, Melanie? Do you really believe in zombies? Like, I found myself doing that thing you do where you shout at the TV, like in a kind of cheeky way. I don't know. It worked for me, I think, formatically a little bit more than it worked for you. But Kevin, you found Keith Morrison to be more subdued in this than in The Thing About Pam?
Yeah, look, I think that this doesn't have the same kind of quirky, fun feeling that The Thing About Pam did.
Well, it's a crime against kids, which is probably more difficult to do that quirky, fun thing around.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, not just kids, but yes, he seems a little more subdued. His narration is still colorful. It's not so elastic as it was with Thing About Pam. It's the format of it is pretty straightforward as far as the way they're doing. It's pretty much soundbite narration, which is how you would put together a TV package.
Yep.
But, the soul of this podcast is a TV show. It's, there's never going to be any root talk. We're never going to, follow Keith Morrison, into...
under somebody's house, digging in the soil.
Yeah, we do get a lot of Keith Morrison, though, probably more so in this factor than when, this eventual TV episode comes out. The interview cuts are little longer,
yeah,
and you hear more of him interacting.
It's more investigative,
It's
right?
a little more intimate than those interactions with him are more intimate in this one than the other podcast, and probably most of the TV shows because they're usually quick things. You might hear him ask a question and just get that soundbite. And that's like, instead of it being a 10-second thing, it ends up being like 25, 30 seconds. So you hear a little more of him. He's still a little performative when he's doing that, like being surprised at something that he absolutely already knew.
Yeah.
Oh, so a dead man's Jeep?
Or sometimes he'll say something like, well, you've said before that blah, blah, blah. So he knows what's going to...
I think I understand a little more about Keith Morrison after listening to him talk to people. But it isn't like the super quirky thing like the other podcasts.
But don't you feel like, too, they show more that they are doing journalism in this? They say, like, this person has never talked to a journalist before. We've been investigating this I feel like the journalism. You have to remember that Dateline producers, yes, they're very often taking a story that's already been done and figuring out how to do it for TV. But sometimes they're also just doing the story because they're also journalists. Yeah. It feels more that way to me. Laura, I want to talk about the story a little bit. We talk about Lori, and there are a lot of red flags that kind of go up at the beginning of this episode.
That's Laurie.
Not Lori. Laurie.
I'm just saying.
And a lot of it has to do with this family, Lori and her, third husband or fourth? Who was Charles? Her fourth or her
fourth?
Mm-hmm. Moving around a lot, sort of following, beliefs, following things. Did that throw up red flags for you when you heard about the transient nature of this woman and this family?
Yes. So I think I was thinking as I was listening to this, anytime you hear about somebody getting into some sort of religion and that religion taking on like this much larger role in their life, and then the person moving around to follow that religion, I'm thinking of some experiences that somebody I know had with someone in their family. The husband and wife got really into this religion, and then their church wasn't strict enough. So they followed somebody to another area where somebody was going to start a church in their basement. And then the next thing you know, like the women had to walk behind the men and you weren't allowed to dance. But it's like when you hear about that transient nature and that moving, like it's like they're following after something. They're trying to find something. And that sort of instability in their life, to me, especially hearing this case, when you hear how much Lori is moving around, was definitely a red flag.
Now, Toby, we hear from Lori's son, Colby. He's a big voice in the podcast. And in the early part of the podcast, he talks about his closeness with his mom. You hear about them growing up, and he was an only child, and they were really good friends. But then it becomes clear later in the episodes that he is talking about his mom in the past tense as if he's lost her. That is like a familiar narrative that we've dealt with before with other things we've talked about, right?
Yeah, I thought, so this is like one of the things I liked about this podcast is this, it's like almost like a subplot, sort of. I guess if it was fiction, you'd call it a subplot. But like his part of the story really seems to be about losing a family member to a cult, essentially.
Yeah.
So while the rest of it is largely true crime and the cult is seen as, you know, an element in that crime situation, what you're getting from him seems more of a domestic drama or something. I mean, it's, you know, this guy loses his mom to these bizarre religious things. And the only thing I'll say about what Laura was saying is I agree with her. I think that the thing that all these people I think can say is this is like almost the way almost all religions start, right? Is that all religions generally start with like a small group of people following somebody around.
Yeah. Podcasts too.
Yeah.
Podcasts too.
Disillusionment with your previous thing and then doing a new version of that thing, right?
Yeah, but it's like the Mormons, for instance, just because, you know, reading Under the Banner of Heaven is like they just continually are moving west because they have to. Yeah, I thought the whole Colby thing was interesting. I thought it added a little more depth to your understanding of Lori, and you're not getting just like this two-dimensional sort of going from being, you know, a contestant for Mrs. Texas to being the mistress of some guy who thinks he's deciding who's going to heaven or whatever it is he thinks he's doing.
So, Toby, I want to ask you a follow-up question to that, because we hear about this woman, Melanie, not the cousin Melanie, but Lori's friend Melanie, who was also a follower of Chad, who believed in initially the things that Chad was talking about, you know, people turning into zombies, about that the world was definitely going to end in 2019 and therefore it was okay to do all of these things that they were planning on doing, recruiting these 144,000 people to be there during the end times or whatever. It becomes pretty clear in the podcast that Melanie is no longer there, but she's talking about it and she's knowledgeable enough to talk about it like as if she were there. Like, do you feel like you're hearing from a former cult member, or do you feel like you're hearing from somebody who may still have one foot in it? Because I found myself asking that question a lot listening to her.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like that guy who was on the thing about Heaven's Gate, who was sitting in a chair by himself in a field.
Yes.
Where, you know, he's able to talk about his experiences and have some perspective on it while still sort of retaining at least an understanding of why she believed the way she did. But, you know, I think the other thing was that it was clear that Chad, he was putting a move on Lori.
You think?
You know? And so it's like,
we've been married together 17 times in past lives.
Melanie, you know, you're not quite as attractive and you had 13 past lives. On the other hand, Lori has had 43 and 17 of them we were married, and another couple of them she was married to saints. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
She was a swimsuit model in all of them.
Do you think the fact that she was attractive, like she's described over and over again in this as being very attractive, like
toned arms, man.
It's that, right?
It's good looking for her age.
Miss Texas.
It's that, right?
Mrs. Texas.
I mean, this is why he clearly like homed in on her. Like, it's because she was hot, right?
There's nothing else that stands out.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, you're looking at this through the Dateline lens or whatever, but they're basically putting her forward as this very attractive woman who's had these things happen to her, and now this guy says they've been married 17 times in past lives.
But she also is a character, Laura, in that she seems to kind of be a chameleon. Her fourth husband, Charles, is, I think, pretty clearly murdered by her brother Alex in this really weirdly concocted thing where his parents just assert like he was ambushed. But we hear earlier Charles's visit with the cops where he says she's been drawn in by this cult. She needs a psych evaluation. She's turned into a different person. She believes in zombies, all this stuff. And then we hear the tapes of her and she sounds fine. Like, what did you think of that, Laura?
I think that was just so telling, that interview with the police where, you listen to him and you're thinking, oh my gosh, this poor guy, because going into this, how this story is going to end. And when you're hearing the tape where he's trying to get help, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I hope somebody believes him. And then you hear the tape of her with the police, with her daughter, and they're like joking around. And before you know it, the police are telling her how to get out of a psych eval and like giving her tips like, well, I'm not allowed to say anything, but here's what you should do. And I have to wonder, just somebody that is that able to turn it on and off, because it was pretty clear that she was believing all of this past life, zombie, all that other stuff. But to know how to hide that in that situation, it was very telling. And I was listening to that as things progressed, obviously, in the story, wondering, how do those police feel now? That guy who like gave her the tip, who's like, because she was really good. And she passed the psych eval. I couldn't, I'm like, oh my God.
Lori did end up submitting to a psych evaluation, and she passed with flying colors. But did you ever think she wouldn't? Lori walked out of that psych ward with a clean bill of health, and nobody listened to Charles.
Kevin, I have two quick questions for you.
Yeah.
Does Nick Schneider sound like the name of the most evil spirit on the planet?
No.
What about
Nick
Oprah
Schneider.
Winfrey? What about Oprah Winfrey? Do you think she has the darkest soul of anybody on the planet?
No, it's funny. It's funny that people think that. Yeah, no. Oh, Oprah's cool.
Well, listen, we don't like the fact that she brought Dr. Oz to the front and all those quacks, but I don't necessarily think she's the darkest.
Nick Schneider,
Nick Schneider. What a name.
Say, wasn't he the superintendent on One Day at a Time?
That's all I could think of.
The giant keyring.
Now, Kevin, before we wrap it up, you have to admit, like, the story here is very compelling. Like, it's clear that there are knowns and unknowns still, right?
Well, unless you know what happens.
Let me tell you something.
Yeah.
Fully, being honest with you, I Googled this a little, and I realized, spoiler alert, that some elements of this are still up in the air, right?
You mean as of today?
Yes, as of today.
IRL?
Yes.
Yeah, no, there are. Because there are a couple of big things along the way where a husband dies and then another husband dies and then, we can... The way the podcast is progressing, they're, knocking them out one by one. So you don't... If you're a newspaper article, you'd read the first two paragraphs and get all the stuff going on.
All the people who are dead.
Yeah, so they're being, very... parsimonious with the way they are dealing out the different details.
So they're serving it like a dessert where you just get a little spoonful and then have to ask for seconds?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out Mommy Doomsday? It is the latest podcast from NBC, the team at Dateline, and I think Neon Hum was involved in this too. Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Mommy Doomsday?
I'm going to go with thumbs up. I love Keith Morrison. I like this better than the one that we listened to where Josh Mankiewicz was the narrator, because Keith Morrison, his voice is just, he's so entertaining to listen to. And also, one of the things I loved about this, the Dateline producers actually found this woman in Hawaii when she was on the run and walked up to her on the street, which is that's my dream right there. Oh my God, I would love to have done that. So just based on that, I think this is a really interesting story. It's one that I followed when it was unfolding. I didn't know all of this background. So it's definitely, it's an engaging story. All the right people are there because it's Dateline. And I would listen to Keith Morrison read the phone book. So that's my review.
Toy Ball, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Mommy Doomsday?
So what kind of drives me nuts about this is Keith Morrison. And I've kind of gotten used to some aspects of him, but he does his thing. And there's nothing the worst writing advice in the entire world is show, don't tell. But I will say that I think in podcasts, you shouldn't be telling people what they should feel about things. I think the really good podcasts bring you around to understanding things well enough that you can decide how you feel on your own. And there is so many little asides that he does during this that are signposting you about, it's strange. And
not the way I would behave in that situation.
Yeah. Can you imagine Amber Hunt or something like when she was interviewing those two guys who worked at the nuclear power plant who were like, leave me alone or whatever. And they cut away and she was just like, weird. I mean, it's just like not, it's just not what I expect from like top quality true crime podcasts. So, I'll give it a thumbs up. But I do think it's,
I'm so happy about that. I'm sorry.
It just kind of dumbs it down for people. I mean, just you don't have to do that. It's maybe it works on TV. Maybe it's like kind of campy, but I think it detracts. But the story is pretty wild, and they've got good interviews and all that stuff. So can't give it a thumbs down.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I can't give it a thumbs down, but I'm only going thumb sideways. Because I can't really give it a thumbs up.
God damn it.
If you are a Keith Morrison fan, I think you'll probably like it. It's a different kind of performance. I think that, Dateline does have a podcast, which is just the audio track.
Which is brilliant.
And so if they want to do something, pull it out and make it really more of a featurey podcast, Keith Morrison be Keith Morrison. In this case, I just, the good parts are that the story is good and I enjoy the interviews. I think I get more out of like the real Keith Morrison listening to those interviews, although they are performative, I know, but it just feels a little more, podcast intimacy in that, as opposed to everything else, which is just kind of TV-ish. Otherwise, it ends up being a fairly basic podcast, so I'm just going thumb sideways.
All right. So I'm thumbs up on this podcast. I love it. And I am like a little bit embarrassed because I'm going to be real. I don't watch Dateline. Like I love listening to A Date with Dateline because I love hearing Dateline through that lens of like people who do love it and talk about it in a funny way. I don't watch it. I don't love that brand of true crime journalism and that sort of taking work that someone else did and making it for TV and doing like all the interviews and recreations and the moments. But that being said, I know this is a dark story with a lot of dark stuff happening in it. But when I listen to something like this, it's the only time I genuinely understand the people who say that they're, quote, like addicted to true crime. Mm-hmm. Like, I find it for some reason, like it draws me in and I find myself talking back when it's on in a way that I don't do typically with media where I'm like, what? Jesus, Alex, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. I find myself doing that in a way that is, yes, it's campy.
I never did anything to harm my daughter or my granddaughter.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Casey Anthony's Parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
The friendship is sharing deal. Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
But if I am doing that, they're doing something right. So for that reason alone, the entertainment that I feel listening to this and I'm dying for episode 5, which I very rarely feel when I have to listen to something for work. I have to give this a thumbs up. I can't help it. I really love Mommy Doomsday. The name is weird. Love the podcast. Thumbs up for me.
I 100% will not be listening to episode 5.
I will. So, Kevin, here we are in the business section of the podcast.
Business section.
How did that music go?
Like this. Yeah, hear that?
Yeah. So, Kevin, we're going to do something that we always forget to do in this part of the podcast.
In the business section?
What is happening on our other podcast? These Are Their Stories, the Law and Order podcast this week. We always forget to promote that on the show, and it's so good. And this week is special.
Right. Well, Rebecca and I are going to be talking about the SVU episode with Sarah Hyland, where she is a smart student and takes too many study pills and kills her roommate so she can be number one at the school. And
who's our special guest?
Our special guest is Lily Flynn.
Yes.
Yeah, so
she's hilarious.
Family affair. She didn't just like come on and say, Daddy, can you put me on the podcast?
Nope.
She actually never asked.
She brought something.
She went and she decided, if this is what my parents are doing, she started from episode 1
of SVU.
And she just binged like 10 or 11 seasons.
Yep.
And
wow, she was prepared.
She was prepared. So I said, you got to come on.
Kevin, who have been some of our other recent guests on these other stories, like to incentivize people to listen? It's funny. It's cool.
Yeah, we had Janet Varney was on very recently.
So great.
Tara Ariano. And Big Ron.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of some of the other folks that we've had.
We've got great guests.
From Slate, who was the...
Jamila Lemieux.
Yes.
My former co-host on Mom and Dad Are Fighting.
Yes, we've had some really great folks there.
Anyway, you should listen to these other stories on our podcast. It's really fun. Kevin, what is going on our Patreon right now?
Well, we also have the Crime Writers on After Show that you can listen to. Yeah, it's in your feed right now, folks. And we're going to be talking a little more about Scandi Noir.
Why we love it.
Why we love it, what makes good Scandi Noir, and other European TV shows that we might be
watching,
checking out right now.
Recommending.
Yeah. Also, Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast is out, and they were looking at a book called The Five.
Yeah.
And my two favorite quotes from that podcast are where Toby Ball says, "I'm not an expert on syphilis." It's contextual.
Congratulations, Toby.
Yeah, I don't recall that, but
that's
it's
a good
still
thing,
accurate.
Toby.
Yeah.
Toby, what venereal disease are you an expert in?
I specialize in
100% is
chlamydia.
herpes. 100%.
Yeah, and I think it was Lauren Bright Pacheco, who's from Murder in Oregon.
Yeah, she's great.
I think she was the one who made a recommendation that maybe for the summer, Toby could do some books that are a little lighter.
Syphilis tourism.
And I think Toby also said something along the lines of, people don't come to the deep dive for the uplifting books.
Yeah, not for the laughs. And then Claire Clark, who's the other guest, she's a specialist in Victorian crime fiction.
Yes.
So she
Are we
brings
going to do the
knowledge.
Queen Quunks on the deep dive? We're going to do some sort of like Victorian crime fiction, historical. Never mind. Go ahead,
Queen
Kevin.
Quunks?
What is Queen
Queen
Quunks?
Quunks. It's this like 2,000-page book that I read. It's like
sounds dirty.
It's a
Sounds like
whole thing.
Sounds like a profanity.
I'm probably pronouncing it wrong.
Right.
It's a whole thing. Kevin, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Of course we do. Our Patreon patron saints are Stacy Jones and Nicole Brushel. Bless you.
Bless you guys. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon. Kevin, where can people go to support us on Patreon and get the 4 extra podcasts that we make there?
Yeah, you can go to patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media.
And we're going to be doing a live Married with podcast again soon, right?
Yeah.
Very exciting.
Yeah, we'll be taking your relationship questions.
Cannot wait. All right, Kevin, should we end the business section now?
It's time to get back to the fun section.
I'm going to fade that music out. Moving on.
Og er omkring kl. 19.00 sejlet ud i en hjemmebygget ubåd i forbindelse med et interview, men er ikke vendt hjem som aftalt.
In 2017, Danish police received a missing persons complaint about a Swedish journalist, last seen departing with a man in his homemade submarine. When the suspect scuttles the sub and says he buried Kim Wall somewhere at sea after an accident, Jens Møljar Jensen's team takes on the impossible task of scouring the ocean to disprove the man's story. The 6-part Danish language series The Investigation, now on HBO, is a dramatic take on one of Scandinavia's most bizarre crimes. It focuses on the cops, divers, and volunteers working the case and conspicuously removes any references to the actual suspect. Are the makers able to take that famously atmospheric style of Scandi Noir and apply it to a more conventional docudrama? Now, we are going to be talking about plot points for the first few episodes of The Investigation, so to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes to hear our thumbs up or thumbs down review. Now, Laura Bricker, if you're looking for an action-packed, a lot of things happen every episode show, this is not the show for you. Am I right?
You are right, but it is sort of soothing to go along at the pace of the investigation.
I love it.
And It's also, I have to say, one of the things I got really into these shows probably last April, and having to watch subtitles and actually pay attention and put your phone down is also very soothing.
Now, Toby, Jens, Kevin, what's the actor's name who plays Jens?
It's Soren Malin.
Now, he played one of our favorite characters on one of our favorite shows, Borgen.
Right.
And he is the protagonist here, but we don't see him doing things that protagonists do in a lot of series like this. Like, he's not the one who's coming up with leads. He's not the one who's chasing clues. It's a lot of just him, like, staring. Right, Toby?
Yes. I mean, it's sort of, he's a bureaucrat, kind of, you know? I mean, he's making sure everything's running well, getting people to the right places, making sure the right resources are being put towards different efforts. I mean, he's more of a manager than sort of a master of sleuthing.
Yeah, and I should just interject here that unlike with Netflix for these international language programs, there is no English dub available on HBO.
There shouldn't be.
And I know that some people have complained that they can't really do the subtitles for whatever reason. So unfortunately, you're out of luck. I do enjoy Soren Malin in his other roles, like in Borgen and whatnot, but I'm really not sure what to make of him here. Because it's a lot of him just kind of like standing with his hands in his pockets.
Can I ask
right?
you a question?
Yeah.
Would he not play Toby Ball in the Swedish version or Danish version?
He absolutely would.
Of our podcast, if it were a Scandi Noir show, like, he would play Toby.
Yeah.
Right? Oh,
yeah.
my God.
Look, I get that he's playing like the quiet guy, and he's not, they're not like creating like the, you can't handle the truth detective who's going to like.
He's not Elliot Stabler.
Yeah, he's not going to like slam his fist down and stuff like that. But this performance combined with this sort of style of, these long shots and passages where nothing, that's very quiet and not a lot happens. It just, the way he acts by not acting, I like him, but it's not really working here. I think if you watched Moneyball, Brad Pitt does a lot of the same stuff. He has a lot of stuff where he's just thinking, or a George Clooney movie. A lot of stuff where he's just thinking, but he's still the persona of those actors. Still, you can see them thinking, or they're there. It just kind of seems like he's not engaged in what's going on around him.
I disagree.
Well, you would be wrong.
I got to tell you, there was a shot in this series that was literally 2 minutes of watching a dog lie on a boat. And the whole time I was like, I'm super in. Like, why are we watching this dog lying in the boat? It's lugubrious in a way that I appreciate. I think he's playing into that. Mm-hmm. But Toby, there's a conscious choice made here in this story that I don't think we've seen in anything we've ever covered before, especially something based on a true thing, where we see none of the action of the crime. We see none of it. And they never mention the suspect's name ever, even though it's based on a real person. And almost all of the action takes place off screen. Even when they find body parts in the ocean, we are actually on the ocean with the divers, and we don't see them find the body parts. Toby, what do you think of this decision to make everything happen off screen?
So I've got a couple reactions. One is just to the idea of not really acknowledging who the killer is and stuff. For the most part, I think it works well. It is a little weird that they show... There are a couple of interview scenes that they have with people who aren't the killer, and the killer does get interviewed, but you hear about it sort of secondhand. That's a little weird, but it wasn't that big a deal. But as far as everything that's happening kind of off screen, what I take away from it, at least so far, it's the institution that's solving this crime, right? I mean, it's not sort of genius deduction or anything like that. I mean, there's some interesting stuff about how smells get transmitted through water so dogs can smell them, and tides and winds and stuff like that, which is kind of interesting and takes some brain power. But for the most part, it's really about, we're going to go through the motions of doing this investigation, and just by being dogged, we will turn up stuff and just wear things down. There's no point at which it's like, aha, that is the smoking gun. They know what the smoking gun is. They just need to find it. Like, it's not a revelation.
But doesn't the contrast between this criminal justice system in Denmark and the American criminal justice system, like, stand out to you? Like, they had a guy who acknowledges a woman died in his presence and acknowledges that he cut up her body and threw it off the submarine. And yet they still don't have enough to charge him with murder. Yeah. Like, isn't that like a huge contrast to kind of what we're used to seeing in terms of these kinds of stories?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Almost to the point where it's like, what? like, regardless of how she died, the fact that he chopped her up probably deserves some jail time. And it really, I mean, it's just so different from anything that you would see on TV here.
Yeah.
There's no chases. You know, again, he's not exactly he is kind of an anti-hero, you know? I mean, it's not like you're really rooting for him at any time. I mean, you're kind of watching him do his thing, and he's, you know, you hope he does well, but he's not a particularly attractive guy with like the way he interacts with his family and stuff.
Yeah, sorry I said he was going to play you, Toby, but I still stand by that.
Okay.
Laura Bricker, Toby just said something that I want to ask you about, because he just said there are no chases in this show, but there is one. Of course, this is episode 4, and it takes basically the whole episode where the cops and the divers are looking for this woman's head in a whole ocean, like a huge expanse of water. And it's all about sort of how dogs smell from currents and dogs smell from wind. And they do all these experiments. And there's this whole thing, the whole first half of the episode is they think they know how to do it, and that doesn't work. And then they think they have another way to do it, and that doesn't work. And then they have a way to do it that it works. And that's literally one development that takes a whole episode to do. What did you think about that, Laura?
I will say, I don't know if you guys heard me yelling when they finally found the body parts in relief, because I was like, are they ever going to find something? But I think what I thought was effective about that episode is I really took away just the intensity and dedication and doggedness of this investigation, because I was feeling the frustration and this just like, oh my God, just like, are they ever going to find something? And watching them out there, and, you know, even just the angle and the way that they filmed out on the water, like you were bobbing around on these Zodiac boats at the same way they were, and seeing the waters they're going into, which were not exactly flat, these waters they were diving into.
Or warm.
Yeah. And I'm like, and I was, the whole time I'm thinking, I can't imagine anybody around here or like going to this level to find the evidence for such a long period of time, to the point where they call in the current expert who just like zips over on his research boat. And he's like, well, actually, blah, blah, blah. And I've done some calculations, and away they go. But I think it was effective. And I just want to say about the dogs, I have some things to say. Dogs, there was some good dog portrayal in this entire show. We have the dog who's never wrong when they're out on the water, and we see this like it's like some sort of a spaniel, brown and white dog, and he's like, "What's wrong with your dog? My dog is never wrong." And then Jens has 2 dogs who he just like walks off into the night with, and I'm like, where is Jens going? Why doesn't he have a flashlight?
And he takes them like skeet shooting and hunting and stuff.
Yeah,
dogs gotta pee.
And he's like, I'm taking the dogs on a walk, and I'm like, you're gonna get killed, Jens. And then we have the victim's parents, their dog. I mean, there's a lot of good dog scenery in this show, I have to say.
There really is a lot of good
dogs and phone calls. A lot of phone calls.
Yeah.
Kevin, what do you think about the lugubrious nature of this show?
Well, it is a real slow burn as far as the action. I understand that that's the style they're going, and just because you could take these hour-long episodes and edit them down to 15 minutes doesn't necessarily mean you should, because that isn't what they're going for. I do wonder, like, how I would enjoy it if it were, you know, a little tighter as far as, you know, the editing of these different scenes and taking out stuff that's probably not needed. You know, I mean, I'm sure, like, you know, somebody said, like, hey, this sushi is great. I wonder if it would taste good fried, this fish. And, yeah, it probably does, but that's sort of not the purpose of it. And I think, you know, the long silences and the sort of nothing happening and kind of looking out and saying, yeah, I guess this is a really difficult job for you divers. Okay, see you tomorrow.
You know what I kept thinking about?
What?
The Lizzie Marriott case, which we wrote about.
Oh, yeah.
In which a woman's body was thrown out onto the Piscataqua River, which has very strong tides, which draw it out into the ocean. And basically here in America, in New Hampshire, they were like, oh yeah, we're never going to find that unless it like comes back. When I was watching this, I was like, you can like find a body in the middle of an ocean if you like just bring a smart dog. I mean, Kevin, did you think of that at all?
Yeah, oops.
Well, yeah, and then those guys that were like lined up, those volunteers that were just going back and forth with their big sticks, and I'm like, we never see something like that.
Well, I think their murder rates are fairly low, right?
Yeah, I mean, I
there's
guess
probably
they have
not
more
a whole lot of
people.
murder investigations.
That's true. Laura, did you know homemade submarines were a thing?
I did not. And that was the part in the beginning of this that was really, they're like, she went out on the homemade submarine. And I'm like,
yes.
What? The homemade submarine? But when they pulled it up out of the water, it looked a lot more impressive than I thought it was going to based on that description.
Yeah, if you look at the real case, I mean, the guy was like it's like an eccentric. I mean, it's sort of like a low rent Elon Musk type who like made things. Like he wasn't just like a guy with a homemade submarine. He was considered to be this like big brain, right, Toby? Like that was the real story as far as I remember it.
This is a rare thing where I actually followed it while it was going on because it was weird. Like I was reading it in The Guardian, and like they were like this Swedish journalist disappeared on this weird Danish guy's homemade sub. I was like, come again?
Yeah.
And so I kind of followed it through the days and until they found her and stuff. It's weird.
But Rebecca, don't you feel as a viewer you're missing something by not being given any information about the accused?
Yes.
Yeah, especially if something...
I do. I'm also not getting enough Pilu... I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he played Casper Yule in Borgen, and he was also in Game of Thrones.
He was Euron Greyjoy.
We know him as Evil Pacey.
Evil Pacey, yeah.
I'm also missing him. He's in too few scenes. A lot
the
that I'm
prosecutor.
missing.
We haven't
here.
gotten to him yet.
Yes,
but I feel like that the decision. I mean, it was a purposeful decision right from the get-go that they were not going to put the accused in the frame at all. Use his name, show an act, or anything like that. And well, it's in a way. The thing that we say, oh, you don't want to glorify, it's victim focused. The question ends up being, again, who are you betraying? Are you betraying your audience by not telling them that part of the story, giving them that context? Or would you be betraying the family of the victim and their feelings if they had to hear again the name of the person that killed them? So I don't know.
Would a happy medium been to have fictionalized this a little bit more, so that it would have been like a little bit more?
Well, no, I mean, I don't think that that's what they're going for. I mean, I think they just like said, no, we're just not going to have. We're just going to refer to him as the accused and tell you nothing more about him. So that's how they wanted to play it.
I think that kind of makes it like almost like this very pure procedural.
Yeah.
Where, it really is. It's just the investigation. There's really nothing else. The only sort of sense of the humanity of anybody involved in the actual crime is through the parents and their interaction with Jens.
Which is who the investigators would know. The investigators wouldn't know the accused, and they wouldn't see what actually happened like normally happens. Now, Toby, before I wrap it up, there is one sort of very hackneyed trope that happens in this show where the cop who is obsessed with the investigation is also just not a great family man because he's just very caught up. What do you think of that?
It's just mind-bendingly annoying.
It's got to be true, though, right? Because they're making everything else. I mean, do you think it might be true, and that's why it was?
But who gives a fuck? Seriously. I mean, I really like. Maybe there's somebody who's like, well, it really like rounds out his character. It's so cliched. Yeah. Like in something else where I feel like, whether you like the pacing or not, or some of the decisions, I feel like the writing's really strong, and I feel like they sort of avoid a lot of the pitfalls of the genre. But then just to drop this thing in, I mean, it just seems really unimaginative and, unnecessary, and just is minutes spent on something that at least I didn't really care at all about.
Meanwhile, I do love a thing that we see is the cop who works for Jens. Is it Malbrit? Or I can't pronounce. Mabrit, yes. She is like so pure that she feels like she has to recuse herself because doesn't she remind you of Saga from The Bridge, Laura?
Yes. Yeah, no,
she's freaking awesome.
When she lost her file folder and she like almost like went into and he's like, so you think you have to step off? And then what did he say? Everybody makes mistakes. Few people talk about them.
All right.
And scene. Wow, that was pretty dramatic.
And then she picked up her
Wait, no,
little
let's
file.
stare
and
for
she
5
walked
minutes
away.
first.
Yes.
Let's put our hands in our pockets.
Let's stare at each
And
other.
look over there. And then cut to a shot of a dog on a boat that we sit on for 2.5 minutes.
Let me drive around my car and think about it.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out The Investigation on HBO? Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for this Scandi noir adaptation for American audiences?
So I'm going thumbs up, and I'm going to give the caveat that I think, people that haven't watched other shows in this genre are going to be like, what the heck? This is so slow. This is so boring. I can't stand it. Whereas I'm like, this is so soothing. I love it. I love that there is no violence in the police investigation. They're just methodical. They're thoughtful. We've got wonderful scenery. So I really enjoyed this. It could have been sped up a little bit, but at the same time, I just thought it was such an interesting case, and I loved all the water shots. I was ready to flip back to my Nordic noir frame of mind, so I'm glad this came along when it did.
Toby Ball, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for The Investigation?
I really like it. I don't mind the pacing at all. I think it's fine. So many of the U.S. sort of cop things are really sort of personality driven, and it's like the maverick cop or the really incisive, smart, the mentalist. It's like always Quincy. It's like these savants or whatever. And I kind of like the fact that this is just really about an institution functioning the way it's supposed to. And just by the nature of that, it gets the information it needs in order to, solve the crime or convict the person or whatever. So I think it's really, really good and really different. So I give it a hearty thumbs up.
Kevin Flynn.
I'm looking forward to watching the rest of the episodes, but I'm going to go thumb sideways because I just can't
killing me.
I just can't see myself recommending this to other people, saying, yes, you'll enjoy it. It's just one of the most antiseptic things that you can watch. Now, maybe that's okay. I mean, I think very vanilla. I like vanilla, but for a crime drama in the Scandi noir style that's edgy and violent and atmospheric, well, this is atmospheric, but it really takes sort of nothing from the regional cinema that it's born from. I think it kind of pulls the punches when it's talking about the crime. It's great to just make it about the investigation, but I don't know. There's a bit of cinematic virtue signaling when making this. So, but look, I'm enjoying it.
So
I am.
You like it, but you can't recommend it?
I'm thinking of our listeners, and I can't say, hey, you should stop what you're doing and watch this. I feel like maybe other folks would not be pleased. So,
all right.
So that's why I'm thumb sideways.
Well, listen, I base my reviews on whether or not I liked something, because that's what people tune in for. Kevin. Mm-hmm. So I'm giving this a huge thumbs up because, like Laura, I find the slowness of it perfect. I love that it's antiseptic. I love that it's bureaucratic. I love that we don't really ever see anything happen. It all happens off screen. And I think
it's below the surface.
I think it's dark as fuck.
Symbolically.
I disagree with you that it's not violent and not dark. They literally found a head in a bag. We don't have to see.
I never did anything to harm my daughter or my granddaughter.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Casey Anthony's Parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets. And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
We didn't see it.
We don't have to see it to know they found a head. And I think this crime was so awful that even just hearing about it like in the third person is enough. And I'm just really, really glad that HBO picked up a thing that we probably would have watched like on Netflix when it became available 2 years after they made it, if it had just been made. You know what I mean? So huge thumbs up for me for the investigation because I like it. Big thumbs up. Now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the crime of the week. Tennessee lawmakers are pushing back against a bill that would add feminine hygiene products to the list of items that are exempt during its annual tax holiday. For 3 days each summer, the state suspends sales tax on certain clothing, school supplies, and computers. Some wanted to add tampons to that list, but are getting resistance from legislators who, according to Forbes magazine, are worried that women will buy too many tampons. Jesus Christ. One politician who happens to be a doctor seems to fear that with no purchase limit on tampons, Tennessee's 1.8 million women of menstruating age will be unable to control themselves and load up on our shameful Moonblood products to deprive the state of that sweet, sweet Tampax money. Seems the non-menstruating lawmakers are more comfortable providing tax breaks to neckties, bowling shirts, and cowboy hats without worry of consumer hoarding. It is estimated that at 7%, a year's supply of tampons generates less than $8 in sales tax. Meanwhile, we call on the wives of these legislators to extract our revenge by sending their husbands out to purchase their tampons and maxi pads because 100% they'll come home with the wrong thing. So, panel, we can again thank men for foiling this plot to save 70 cents on sanitary products. And yes, we will say it. This is sexist as fuck. But Laura Bricker, what do you think the women of Tennessee were going to do with all of those extra tampons that they were planning to hoard?
Oh, boy. The possibilities are endless. So I have two answers. Well, Ken and I were eating dinner tonight. I asked him, and he said, he said, they're really good for nosebleeds. Yes. Yeah. And he said, we learned in the ambulance, use them for nosebleed. And then I looked up and I was like, well, what else could you use tampons for? Apparently you can make them into pom-poms.
So they were going to start a fight club.
They were going to be like, woo, woo, woo. I don't know who they were going to be cheering for, but tampon pom-poms. I mean, there you go.
So Toby Ball, despite the incredible sexism and misogyny of these legislators, what do you think these women were going to do with all of these tampons that they were going to be hoarding?
Put them in frappuccinos.
Kevin Flynn, what do you think?
Gwyneth Paltrow Christmas tree ornaments.
Oh, I was thinking maybe like build a tampon snowman.
Oh.
Do you want to build a snowman?
Yeah, like Christmas decorations, just put them all over the lawn, you know, or maybe build a Dolly Parton statue out of them because, you know, she doesn't want a statue
use
on
a tampon?
All right, we should probably end it on that note, but before we do, Laura Bricker, do we have a cat of the week this week?
We do have a cat. We've had some dogs. We've had the hedgehog. It was time to go back to cats. Lauren Horsch sent in.
Hi, Lauren.
Yes, and I love this. Lauren is a longtime listener. I always love when longtime listeners sound in like this. And Lurker, finally getting up the courage to nominate Arthur for Cat of the Week. Arthur is a white cat. She sent me some pictures. Actually, they're in our Facebook discussion group. Arthur came to us from the mean streets, really the storm drains of Durham, North Carolina, more than a year after the frequent front porch feedings. So they were feeding him for a year. He's been living with us in some capacity for probably close to 6 months. Last week, he got to see the vet for the first time to get all of his shots, tests, neutering. He got the snip. He's a cranky, rambunctious cat that wakes her up exactly at 5:45 every morning so he can get his breakfast. He has brought she and her husband so much joy during the pandemic. He's officially an indoor cat after he tested positive for FIV. That's not like chlamydia that my cat had. It's another cat disease. But that hasn't stopped him from trying to break out to fight the giant possum that has been visiting them. The possum is also pictured. So
they're so creepy, those possums.
Yeah, and Arthur, there's a picture of Arthur. He's sniffing some wine, so I can appreciate that. So good job, Arthur.
All right, Laura Bricker, if folks are maybe not brave enough to go to our Facebook discussion group or email us at crimewriterson@gmail.com and just want to tweet you their cats or dogs or iguanas to be Cat of the Week, how can they find you on Twitter?
At Laura Bricker.
And Toby Ball, folks want to reach out to you and say, hey, I listened to your Strange Arrivals podcast about UFOs, and I believe, Toby, you are wrong. How can they find you on Twitter?
They can pick that argument at Toby Ball NH.
And Kevin Flynn, if folks want to reach out to you and tell you how much they also enjoy your Bing Crosby sweater, how can they find you on Twitter?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you can find me at Reb Lavoie. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Crime Writers On. And I encourage you really to join our amazing community and our official Crime Writers On Facebook discussion group. We have a regular old Facebook page, and there's a button there to join the group. If you answer even one question, we will let you in. Support the show at patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media, and you will get the Crime Writers On After Show, Married with Podcast, Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast, and Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our line editor is the very handsome Olivia Burdett. The executive producer of this fine program is Kevin Flynn. This show was recorded in the Yoga Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement where we give each other long, plaintive looks while contemplating a murder case. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later. I was telling Laura how you and I have become like friends now.
Oh, yeah, it's weird.
We talk on the phone and shit. And what's so great... I love it. I don't know why I never became friends with Toby before, because he's fucking awesome. Laura, I feel like you and I have been friends for a while. Like, we text and shit. So Toby and I talked about something on the phone last week, and then we talked again today. He texted me yesterday, and he's like, do you have 5 minutes to talk? And I was upset that I didn't, because I wanted to talk to my friend Toby so badly. And then he was like, it'll only take 5 minutes. And I was like, are you quitting? And he's like, no, that would take 7 minutes.
Partners in Crime Media.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.